The Trump administration is preparing to replace its controversial travel ban, which sought to bar almost all travel to the U.S. from 6 countries, with more targeted restrictions affecting a slightly larger number of countries. People familiar with the process said. Rather than ban travel altogether from the nations on the new list, the new order is set to create restrictions that vary by country, based on cooperation with U.S. mandates, the threat posed by each country and other factors. These people said. The Department of Homeland Security originally flagged 17 nations as failing to comply with standards, such as informing the U.S. of known terrorists and issuing reliable passports. Facing the prospect of being included in a travel ban, about half of those 17 nations made changes that brought them into compliance, the people familiar with the process said. DHS then recommended travel restrictions be imposed or extended on the remaining countries. The specific number wasn't available, but it was about half of 17, according to one person familiar with the plan, which would put the total around 8 or 9. Under the recommendation, travelers from 1 or 2 more countries could face additional background checks when seeking to travel to the U.S., but not a travel ban. One person described the new system as being tailored sanctions commensurate with their deficiencies that takes into account the threat posed by the country as well as foreign policy implications of imposing restrictions. The new restrictions won't have a stated end date. Rather, nations may have restrictions added or removed at any time as various factors change, these people said. It wasn't immediately known which countries would be affected by the new restrictions. President Donald Trump will make the final decision, and it was possible he could reject or modify the DHS plan. The travel ban into the United States should be far larger, tougher and more specific, Mr. Trump said on Twitter earlier this month, in response to a terrorist attack in London. On Thursday, a White House spokeswoman added, "The Trump administration will ensure we only admit those who can be properly vetted and will not pose a threat to national security or public safety." The new rules are scheduled to be announced by Sunday, when the existing, 90-day travel ban expires. The ban now applies to people from Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. The first version of the travel ban affected 7 Muslim-majority countries and was laid out in an executive order in January. The ban, which Mr. Trump said was needed to keep the U.S. safe from potential terrorists, came under heavy criticism for both its substance and its chaotic rollout. It also suspended refugee admissions. It was quickly put on hold by the courts. Mr. Trump issued a revised order in March that covered 6 of those 7 countries. Iraq was removed, and it, too, was put on hold by the courts. In June, the Supreme Court allowed a modified version to take effect, with exemptions for travelers with bona fide relationships in the U.S. The stated goal of the travel ban was to give the administration time to conduct a worldwide review of nations to see which countries are failing to comply with U.S. demands. As part of that process, the U.S. laid out its demands to all countries. These include requirements that nations inform the U.S. about people it knows or believes to be terrorists or criminals, that countries issue or have active plans to issue electronic passports including biometrics, and that countries regularly report lost and stolen passports to Interpol, an international policing agency. Those standards are consistent with those that the Obama administration sought in its effort to better screen potential visitors. The difference is the Obama administration generally tried to persuade nations to cooperate with incentives such as visa-free travel to the U.S., whereas the Trump administration is using threats, such as a ban on travel to the U.S. They're now creating sticks where there once were carrots, said David Heyman, a senior DHS official in the Obama administration. After an initial review, 17 nations were flagged as being inadequate in their compliance with these standards and twice that number were seen as being at risk of not complying. The list of 17 was whittled in half through engagement, led by the State Department, with each country. Fearful that they would be subjected to a new travel ban, several countries modified their policies or developed action plans to do so, one administration official said. The goal is to get people into compliance so that we know who's going into the country, so we can keep the bad people out, a second official said. It wasn't clear whether countries on the current ban list would be included in the new restrictions. One person familiar with the matter said that a couple of the 6 countries that are now banned have improved their cooperation,